So now that we've learned how to navigate through Onshape, let's go ahead and create a new document. So we'll go to Create and hit Document, and let's call this document a Holey cube, and hit OK. And once the document opens, I want you to go over to your Sketch feature and select your front face. And then let's look at it from the front view. So we'll hit the front view on our view cube, and then we can select our rectangle tool, and I want you to click and drag off to the top right of your origin, and click again. And then to exit my rectangle tool, I'm going to find the Escape button on my keyboard. And then I want you to click on the top right corner of your rectangle and kind of play with the size of it a little bit. Now you'll notice that we can change the size and the location of this rectangle. I also want you to notice that the outline of this shape is completely blue. The color of our geometry in Onshape is actually really important. Blue lines and shapes means it is not constrained. It is proper practice when you are 3D modeling to always constrain your sketches. And all constrain means is tell it where to be and how big to be. And so let's go ahead and do that. And the first thing I want you to do is go up into your ribbon and find the coincident constraint and click on it. And all the coincident constraint does is it tells 2 points to be the same point. And so I'm going to click on the bottom left point of my rectangle and the origin. And then I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard to exit out of that constraint. Notice that 2 of my lines have turned black. Those 2 lines are now constrained to my origin. I've told them where to be. But notice that these 2 lines are still blue. That's because I can still change them. I can still move them around and manipulate them. They are not constrained yet. I can change its size in the Y direction and in the X direction. So let's go ahead and add those constraints as well. And to do that, let's go up here to our ribbon and find our dimension tool. And I'm going to click on the top of my shape and the bottom of my shape and drag it out. And click, and then type in 1.5 on my keyboard. And then I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard to exit out of this tool because I want to play with this rectangle again. I want you to notice that we can change the width of this rectangle, so we can change the size in the X direction, but we can't change it in the Y direction, which is why this top line is now black, but this line is still blue. So that's the last constraint we need to fully constrain this shape. Let's go back to our dimension tool, and let's click on the left side and the right side, drag it down and click, and type in 1.5 to make a perfect square. And now that our square is completely black, we know it's fully constrained and we're ready to finish our sketch. I'm going to come over here and select isometric and then hit the extrude button. And I'm going to select the geometry that I want to extrude. Now I can extrude it forward or backwards. I'm going to extrude it forwards, and I'm going to type in a distance of 1.5 inches for my depth and hit the check mark. And now we've created a cube, hence the cube in our Holey cube. So let's go ahead and add some holes to it. And to do that, I want you to click your sketch feature and then select the top face of our cube to add a sketch to. And once you see your sketch above your top view, I want you to click your top button on your view cube. And I'm going to move my screen around by clicking on my mouse wheel and zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to find my circle tool. And I want to put my circle tool somewhere in the middle of this face. I'm going to click and let go and click again. And for my dimension, I'm going to type in 1 inch and hit enter on my keyboard. And then I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard to exit out of my circle feature. And I'm going to click on the center of my circle to move it around. Now you'll notice that my circle is still blue. I can't change the size of it. I told it its diameter, but I have not told it where to be yet. So let's go ahead and do that. And so I'm going to find my dimension tool, and I'm going to click on the center of my circle and the top edge. And I'm going to drag it out. And I'm going to tell it to be right in the center of this cube. And so the entire depth here is 1.5, and so what's half of that? And you might be able to do it in your head, but Onshape will actually do it for you. All you have to do is type in 1.5 on your keyboard and then type divided by 2 and hit enter, and it'll do the math for you. It'll figure out what that dimension is. And coincidentally enough, we had it pretty close to the center, so it didn't look like it changed much. And I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard, and I want to see how we change this circle now, because it's still blue, but we've added a location dimension. So if I click on my circle, you can see that I can still move it left and right, but I cannot move it up and down. We've locked it in place in the Y direction, but not in the X direction. And so to add that last constraint, let's go ahead and hit the dimension tool again. And let's click on the center and the left edge and drag it up until I get this dimension up here. Click, and I'm going to type in 0.75 again and hit enter on my keyboard. And now you can see we have a fully constrained circle. I'm going to go ahead and finish sketch, go to my isometric view, and I'm going to hit the extrude button and select my geometry. And we could add to this circle, but if I click on this arrow and drag it down, we can actually go in the other direction. And so right now it's selected as an add, but if we hit remove, it'll actually start cutting out a hole in the circle. And I can drag my arrow as deep as I want it, or I can change this from a blind hole to a hole that goes all the way through. And if you look, what that does is it makes a hole all the way through my cube. And so once you've changed your extrusion to a remove and you've selected through all, go ahead and hit check. And you can check to see if it did it right. And it looks like we have a hole through our cube. Let's practice that again. Let's add another hole to the front of this face. And let's learn a new way to start a sketch. I'm going to right click on this face and find new sketch. And then once the sketch is created, I'm going to go to my front view and I'm going to draw another circle. But this time I'm just going to click. I'm not going to give it a dimension. I'm just going to click down and hit escape on my keyboard. And so now I can move this circle around. And if we click on the outside of the circle, we can change its size. And I show you to build the circle this way to show you that you can always add the dimension after the fact to fully constrain it. And for the record, we actually don't even need to fully constrain it to do an extrusion. I can hit finish sketch and then go back to my home view. And I can extrude this unconstrained circle very easily either direction. It's just not proper practice to do so. And so I'm going to hit X and I'm going to go back into the sketch. I'm going to right click on the sketch and click edit. I'm not going to start a new sketch. I'm not going to go to sketch and click on this face or start a new sketch on this face. That's very important. That'll cause all kinds of new problems in here. Instead, I'm going to right click and hit edit sketch and go to my front face. And let's add some dimensions to constrain this sketch. And so I'm going to go to dimension and then click on the outside of my circle and click. And this time I'm not going to tell it to be 1 inches. This time I'm going to give it a diameter of 1.2. And I'm going to hit escape on my keyboard to exit. And it's okay if the circle accidentally moves outside. Just click on the center and drag it back to the center. But this circle can still move in the X and Y direction. So let's go ahead and add those last two constraints. And actually this time I want to show you a different way to center this circle. I want you to hover your mouse over this top line until you highlight that point. Don't select it, just hover over it. And then do the same thing along this line. Hover over it until you find that point. These are the center points of this edge. And so I want to show you a couple of new constraints. So go ahead and select that center point on that top edge. And then I want you to hit your vertical constraint. And I want you to tell the center of your circle to always be vertical with this point up here. And so what did that do? Well, if I hit escape on my keyboard and I try to move my circle, I can now move it up and down, but I can no longer move it left and right. It either has to be above or below, so vertical, to this top center point of this edge. And for our last dimension, we're going to do something similar. We're going to hover over this line and select this point. And now I'm going to find my horizontal constraint. And I'm going to tell the center of this circle to always be horizontal with that edge. And you can see now we have a fully constrained center circle. And so once it's black, go ahead and hit finish sketch. I'm going to go to my isometric view and I'm going to hit extrude, select that geometry. I'm going to change it from an add to a remove. And I'm going to change it from blind to through all. And hit your check mark. And so now we have two holes in the middle of our shape. Let's go ahead and add one more, but this time I don't want to do just a plain circle. I think I'm going to do a smiley face. And I strongly recommend you stop and watch me first, and then you can do whatever design you want afterwards. And so once I've created the sketch, I'm going to go to my right view, And I'm going to find my line tool. And I'm going to click on this face and draw my first eye. I'm going to hit escape on my keyboard and select my line tool again to draw another one separated from the first one. And drag down, hit escape on my keyboard. I don't like it there, so I'm going to move it in just a little bit. And then I'm going to find my 3-point arc tool. I'm going to click off to the left, click off to the right, and drag it down to create my smiley face. And since this last sketch is just a fun little design, I'm not going to actually worry about fully constraining it. And I'm going to finish my sketch and try to extrude. And you'll notice that there's nothing to extrude besides this outer face. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it, because I didn't actually finish any shapes off here. And so I'm going to go back into this sketch. I'm going to right click on it and go to edit sketch. It's very important that you don't start a new sketch when you're trying to edit an old one. And I'm going to click on my right view, and I'm going to add to this shape. So I'm going to go back to my line tool, and I'm going to finish off this shape. I'm going to drag to the right, drag down, and it's very important that you highlight that dot before you click. Otherwise, it won't actually complete the shape. So let's do it again over here. Make sure you hit that dot, drag it to the right, drag it down, and then finish it off. Hit escape, and I'm going to select my line tool again to add to my arc. I'm going to drag it inwards. Hit escape, select my line tool again to separate a new line, and drag it to the left. Hit escape, and then finally I'm going to add my arc tool. And I want to make sure I hit that dot, make sure I hit the other dot, and drag it in. And then I'm going to finish my sketch again, go to my home view, and I'm going to try to extrude this once again. And this time you'll notice that I can only select 2 of my shapes and not the third one. So I'm going to hit cancel and go back into that sketch again. And if we look at it, you can see why. I didn't actually lock those 2 points on. Onshape cannot see a shape if you do not complete it. And so I'm going to find my coincident constraint, and I'm going to connect these 2 dots. Hit escape on my keyboard to exit and finish my sketch. And then one more time, I'm going to go to my isometric view. And this time I'm going to select all 3 shapes. I'm going to change them from adding to my shape to removing from my shape. And I'm going to change it from a blind distance to a distance through all. And hit OK. And if I look at it now, you can see I created my 3rd hole. And so now I want you to go ahead and add some random shape to yours. It could be another smiley face, it could be your initials, or it could be some other emoji. And the cool thing about Onshape is it automatically updates as you work. You don't have to actually save it. But if you're not sure, what you can do is you can click on this Onshape button, and it'll take you back to your document folders. I'm going to right-click on it and go down to Open Link and New Tab. And then in my New Tab, I'm going to look inside my document folder. I'm going to click on my Shapes project folder, and you can see I have my Holey cube completed and saved in there. And so we are now done with our shape.